we're all here to hear the final research launch of the NODES project. We had climate change in October. That was followed up by a session on COVID-19 in December. And just by way of introduction to those who are joining us perhaps for the first time, NODES is the Narrative Observatory combating disinformation and polarization in Europe systematically. And this project is co-funded by the European Commission, and we're delighted that the Commission representatives are joining us today. It started back in February of 2023, and we are now in the home straight. This is actually the final research launch that we're going to have. The three topics that were chosen for this exercise were climate, were the pandemic, and last but not least, today's subject, a very hot topic of migration. And our project spans 5 countries: France, Spain, Poland, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. The mission in NODES is how to overcome social polarization and try and restore reliability of information in the age of social media. And our goal is to enable public deliberation on the most difficult and divisive issues. As we know, it's pretty difficult to have public deliberation if things are very polarized and people are not really listening to each other. So what we're looking for here is to allow ourselves, again, to generate diversity of opinions, to welcome that, to embrace it, as it is the lifeblood of our democracy. But as I was saying, there are a number of issues that make that extremely difficult now, and that's the reason why we're focusing on this so much. The importance of shared and reliable information. Of course, it enables informed choice. It provides the foundation of social cohesion, and in so doing, it becomes a platform for common action. Now, why is it that we focus on narratives? In a sense, they are user manuals to help us with our reality. They provide cognitive representations of the rules explaining how our social world works. They provide us with understanding, with the ability to predict, and a platform for individual and collective action. Existing narratives, the ones that we are currently observing and party to, are highly divisive, and narrative analysis maps the polarized ecosystem and shows potential bridges that enable constructive dialogue. And many of you may have joined us in those 2 previous sessions where what we were looking to do on the one hand was diagnose the situation that we're in now, which isn't necessarily very pretty, but on the positive side, start looking at the connections that actually exist and that may not be evident to us without the analysis that has been taken forward in this project. Now, the project is soon to conclude. It's going to conclude at the end of July of this year. And by way of introduction into this session, I'm delighted that we are joined by António Vitorino. António Vitorino is an esteemed board member of Reimagine, I think one of the founders 5-6 years ago. He has had an outstanding career as a policymaker, not only in Portugal, the European Union, where I had the privilege to work quite closely with him during the Prodi Commission, when I was working with Pascal Lamy, and in the United Nations system. He's been a judge in the Constitutional Court in Portugal, Minister of the Presidency and Defense in the government of António Guterres, who's the current Secretary General of the UN. He was European Commissioner for Justice and Home Affairs, with lots of elements touching upon migration, of course. And most recently, he has been the Director General of the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, that he left at the end of last year. So without further ado, let me hand the floor over to you, António.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and good morning to all of you. I'm here very much delighted to learn, because indeed this is one of the issues that I've been focusing for many years. And the truth is that it's one of those areas where perceptions and realities are usually very far apart. And nowadays, due to the extreme polarization of our societies, the difficulty is to craft a message that addresses the complexity of migration has become much harder. My starting point is that if you look to the Pew Research surveys, you will see that in most of the European countries, citizens consider that there are 2 to 3 times, sometimes 5 times more migrants than they really are in their countries, which means that there is a huge gap between some facts in the reality and the perception of those facts by the citizenship. And that we cannot ignore perceptions when we try to craft a message. We cannot create the expectation that the message itself alone will change realities. And this makes this issue, migration, particularly prone to disinformation and to misinformation. So having the right message addressing different aspects of the migration policy is extremely relevant, and I'm very much looking forward to your conclusions. In fact, there are elements that are very much focused on the economic impacts of migration, but we cannot ignore that in a number of cases, the positioning of people towards migration is less focused on economic issues, and it's much more focused on cultural and identitarian issues. So the challenge is to have a message that at the same time does not depart from reality, does not hide the difficulties or the challenges of migration in real terms, but at the same time addresses the anxieties and the doubts and the fears of our fellow citizens. A narrative that bridges realities and perceptions nowadays. Now, I will conclude by saying that, of course, identifying the message is extremely relevant. We need to address a number of issues which go from fears from losing jobs, from pressure on wages, to the difficulty of living with those who are different from us. But at the end of the day, we cannot ignore that the message cannot be independent from the messenger. And one of the challenges is, how can a message help to create trust and to strengthen the credibility of the different messengers that we need? And last but not least, usually in these debates, there is one voice that is always missing. It's the voice of the migrants themselves. And when we are dealing with a social process, an highly human process, we need also to rely on the added value of the interpersonal relation. And we should also be concerned about how can we make the voice of migrants more audible in this debate. Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you so much, Anthony, for inviting me. And I pass the ball back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Antonio. And we are going to be looking forward very much to hearing you conclude this event, because I think that there is much that we're going to hear from our presentations and indeed from the discussion that will feed this debate, and also we will value very much, I think, the feedback that we'll get at the end. As Antonio pointed out, we have a lot of gaps, and there are big gaps between perception and reality, but perception is people's reality. And so we have to also get our heads around that and not be blind to it or fail to accept it, and see how we can work to make those bridges. I'd now like to hand the floor over to Yannic Blaschke, who's the policy officer in DG Connect at the European Commission, working on media policy, on communications networks, on content and technology. And it is this part of the Commission that has kindly provided the funding for the project. Yannic, the floor is yours.
Thank you a lot, and happy to say a few words from the Commission perspective. I mean, of course, this project is also ultimately funded by the European Parliament, which instructs the European Commission to invest the funding. So also our thanks to the European Parliament for having made this possible. Starting, I mean, as you know, fighting disinformation and ensuring the integrity of our information ecosystem is an integral part of the Commission's current mandate, and the Commission has invested a lot of effort and resources into updating our legal and co-regulatory framework. You will have seen the introduction of the Digital Services Act, the revision of the Code of Practice on Disinformation, the introduction of the Artificial Intelligence Act, Media Freedom Act. So this is really something that we have been working on full steam to update our legal framework for this new reality of the digital transformation. And now, of course, you see this also in a huge focus with a view to the European elections. Ultimately, all EU efforts focus on an environment that allows and nurtures open and democratic debate, ensures trust between citizens. And in order to do that, and in order to make the best use of the tools that we have now at our disposal, it's of course crucial that we understand how the information ecosystem works. And there's questions such as what is out there in terms of the narratives that are shaping citizens' perceptions? What is impactful with regards to how people engage with each other online? What is shaping behavior? What is shaping polarization in online debates? And projects such as Nodes are making, of course, like a key contribution to enhancing our understanding of that. And on top of that, also giving solutions on how we can have better online debates, how we can come together and have more shared values and identities again. And that's also why today's topic of migration is, of course, an incredibly crucial one. Not only it's a very long-standing issue with regards to disinformation, it's one where the spread of false information is incredibly prone. As the previous speakers have already said, it's also very, very prone to clashes and clashes of values and perceptions. And on top of this long-standing trend of migration being used in disinformation context, also this is again very relevant in the context of the European elections, where fact-checkers and other experts in the fields have already sounded the warning bells that narratives on migration might play a very pertinent role, because we see this revamping of narratives that are very much used already in the past in a new context in the European elections. So with that, thank you very much for this workshop, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing more about the work that was done and the insights gathered, and to see how we can use that for our policy as well. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Yannic, and thanks again for that valuable support. And indeed, as you said, of course, the European Parliament is always there and a very important supporter of our work at Reimagine. So now we're going to move into the principal element on presentation, where for the first time, you are going to see the analysis that has been generated by Reimagine on migration in this node space. And we are going to begin with our dynamic duo from Poland. Firstly, Professor Andrzej Nowak. Andrzej is our lead researcher, a very experienced professor of psychology at the University of Warsaw at the School of Social Sciences and Humanities, but he also spends part of his time at the Florida Atlantic University, no doubt splitting it up climatically. He's done research concerning social influence, social transitions, dilemmas, the self and emotions, and neural networks. and he's currently working on culture, conflict, and radicalization, as you can see. He's the chief narrative scientist at Reimagine. Andrei.
Thank you very much. So as we heard, the migration is one of the central topics for Europe. Please go forward with slides. One more, okay. And we can observe very strong polarization on this topic. This topic also induces very strong emotions, fear, both by migrants and of migrants, anger, sadness, empathy, and compassion, and also hope. That also catalyzes identities, and mainly empathy with the migrants, but also identification with the local community. Narratives also reveal moral values, which means basically what we stand for. We observe differences between different countries. Also, this topic is very complex. Attitudes to different groups of migrants may be different, and shortly I'll show this the example of it. It's also a complex, highly dynamic issue where the narratives and attitudes change in time. Next slide, please. So here you can see the analysis of big data. This is from Google's GDELT. And we have mapped here the use over time of two different terms to describe migrants. One is migrant, the other one is refugees. And the term migrants in general is either used in more usually in more neutral or negative narratives, and refugees is used in almost exclusively in with positive connotations. And what you can see here, this is you can see here the graphs of how the use of these two terms change in time, and you can see that in all the countries we can see a big spike of the use of term refugees at the moment of the start of war on Ukraine. And you can see this is the same, basically the same happened in all the countries. And let's concentrate on what's happened. Next slide, please, in Poland. So Poland is because Poland is a neighboring country of Ukraine. There were a very high number of migrants coming from Ukraine to Poland. What you can see here is that you can see spikes in both the use of term migrants and refugees. The time the term migrants became especially popular during just before the Ukraine war, where migrants from Africa and Middle East were in high number gathered on Polish-Belarus border. This is the blue line. You can see the spike. However, you can see also the big spike at the moment of Russian invasion on Ukraine. The next slide, please. So clearly we can see that there is more than just one the discussion on or the debate in the public sphere on migrants is quite complex. It has different themes, different narratives, and to understand better the narratives, we have analyzed the corpus of Facebook posts, approximately 20,000 posts. What is interesting, we also have the interactivity index. It means for every post we could follow how many times it was liked, commented on, or reposted. We have concentrated on 5 countries: Spain, France, Ireland, Poland, and UK. And we just monitored the public accounts on Facebook of mainstream media, political parties, institutions, NGOs, and scientific communication. And depending on the country, we're monitoring about 40 to 100 outlets per country. So we have in this research we have concentrated on qualitative analysis of selected sample. So we wanted to understand what are the qualitatively different narratives. And from this big corpora of data, we have collected or separated a sample and manually annotated manually annotated the sample. It was done by two experts, two narrative experts, were in several, when the initial notes were compared, and then they both have annotated separately the posts, and then we looked for how much for the convergence, for the reliability of coding. Then we brought in AI, and this is something we are currently working intensely on, which is we gave the descriptions of narratives to large language models, and then we looked at the decision of large language models, which are feedback to again to the coders, and in this interaction we have finally came up with a final number of narrative. Then our next step is the quantitative analysis of data, and today we'll show you the results only for one country, Ireland. So with this, with this, I'll pass on to Marcin.
Thank you very much. So as Andrzej have mentioned, we have started with actually reading a large part of this posts, and what we were interested in were some dominant motifs, phrases, images, repeating in different texts, and this is relatively similar to the existing research based on keyword approach. But we're also trying to look beyond this surface and also check for the basic structure of the story, because the same set of images or words may be used in reverse to tell a story that has a totally different moral approach or totally different attitude towards migrants in this case. And last but not least, we have also tried to pinpoint some implied narrative communities. So who is the us and them implied by different stories. And as a result of this first stage, we came up with a huge board. This is obviously just a small fraction of it, of something that looked like press clippings from 5 countries. And we tried to cluster them to find these repetitive motifs and structures. And as a result of this clustering, we have identified some basic recurrent motifs that finally led us to identifying 7 dominant narratives that currently organize public debate on migration in the analyzed European countries. What is very important is that, as Andrzej has already mentioned, these debates vary from country to country, and situation in Spain is obviously very different than the situation in Poland or Ireland for geographical reasons, for cultural reasons. But we try to create a map that is universal, that would allow us to compare absolute and relative popularity of different narratives in different countries. So let me now tell you a little bit about each of these 7 narratives. But before I do that, let me show you the algorithm we have used to organize them. So whenever we encounter a new post, a new story, a new article, first thing we ask about is attitude towards migrant. And it can be negative, positive, or neutral. If the attitude is neutral, the situation is relatively simple. This is the narrative we named Crisis and Regulation, the one that attempts to create a neutral, non-biased point of view, just neutrally describing the situation in terms of number, possible solutions, and challenges. But if the situation is described as either positive attitude towards migrants or negative skeptical attitudes toward migrants, the analysis becomes more complicated, and we need to ask some additional questions to pinpoint which narratives are we dealing with. There can be different perspectives on the topic, and we can either describe the situation from the point of view of economy. So migration is beneficial for economy, it's good for economy. We need more migrants to avoid demographic catastrophe, to grow our domestic product. Or if the general attitude towards migrants is negative, we have a mirror narratives that says migrants are bad for economy, they are stealing our jobs, they are only interested in social security. But there's also an alternative to this economical point of view, which is a moral perspective. And in this case, the situation is bifurcating again. We need to ask, what is the geographic perspective? So how is the camera placed in this narrative? And there are, again, two options, both in positive and negative attitude towards migrants. We can have an internal perspective, which shows migrants as already being here in our country and either integrating with us and needing our help, or when the attitude is negative, not integrating with us and being a kind of threat. Or we can adopt an external perspective in which migrants are in the country of origin or just traveling or in temporary camps. And when the attitude towards them is positive, there is this very powerful narrative built on empathy and caring and calls for help and helping them to get to our country. Or if the situation is presented as a threat, we have another very suggestive narrative, which we termed Under Siege, which shows migrants as a powerful, hostile force approaching our borders. So let me now dive a little bit into details and demonstrate what have we learned about each of these narratives. And I will conclude with showing some potential counter-disinformative strategies and narrative bridges that we can learn from this analysis. So narrative number one, tragedy, is the narrative that presents the external perspective. So the migrants are still out there, but the attitude is positive. So this is the narrative built on solidarity, empathy, criticizing inhumane politics, all the stories about overcrowded boats, drowning, and victims, casualties, need for help fit into this narrative. And this narrative is very clearly identifiable by a set of images that usually accompany it. So we were focusing not only, as I've mentioned, on text, but also on the images. And we can see that these overcrowded boats, sea harbors, also dramatic pictures of crime scenes and bodies are typical for this narrative. I guess you all still remember the unfamous photo of young Aylan Kurdi, the 2.5-year boy washed ashore on one of the beaches. He became the icon for this narrative. This is a very accusing, disturbing image, forcing us to ask question, what is our responsibility, what we should force politicians or EU to do to avoid this kind of tragedies. But we can also take a closer look at a different narrative that is still built on solidarity and empathy and still is criticizing inhumane politics, but this time the perspective, the camera angle is different because we see migrants as people who are already here with us. And this narrative asks different set of questions about how can we help them here, how can we help them to integrate, what can we do to avoid discrimination. This is the narrative that is also full of criticizing of different political parties and accusing them of spreading fear or xenophobia. And again, we can also take a closer look at potential images that typically illustrate this narrative. Some of them are pretty trivial, like people welcoming migrants. Some of them are more complex and interesting. For example, families of migrants in community centers. And what is interesting about these pictures is that to fit into this narrative, they need to portray migrants here. So in our country, in Poland, in Spain, wherever the narratives come from, but also they have to be presented as different. So different skin tones from local people, still wearing their backpacks, or in a temporary situation that clearly show us that they are still in a verge of adapting, that they need our help. And the third group are the very interesting pictures of solidarity, very often using child drawings and hand as a symbol of caring and solidarity. And this was particularly interesting and inspiring for us because this is exactly the set of pictures that we have already identified in our research on climate narratives. So very often in our research in nodes, we see how typical images and stories are adapted from one narrative to another. This is why migrations may be very important, because they are also these key narratives that later may moderate our attitudes toward vaccines or towards climate or towards other challenges, because they determine whether we trust the government or not, whether we identify with the local community or less. The third positive narrative is far least popular amongst this, but it is very characteristic, so we needed to cluster it separately, despite the fact that it's not very popular. This is a story that that migrants are good for economy. As I mentioned, that we need them to avoid the demographic crisis, that entrepreneurs need narratives. And when we started our research, I was very familiar with this narrative because this is the narrative many governments use. This is the narrative EU likes to use in central communication. But when we started to actually take a look at public debate and how often people use this argument, this was a marginal number. And again, we have a set of pictures. I will only concentrate on the first group of pictures here because it's interesting to show how these subtle differences may put us in one narrative or another. Here again, like in narrative number 2, so the solidarity, we see a group of migrants, a group of people, but this time they are presented as a quote unquote normal people. So without a special caption, you won't be able to say that they are actually migrants. And in this good for economy narratives, migrants are presented as fully blended in, indistinguishable part of the global market, global job market, which stands out in stark contrast with different narratives. Narrative number 4 is a neutral one. And I'm sorry to say that, relatively boring one. In different topics when we were analyzing climate or COVID-19, these neutral narratives were relatively important and they formed potential narrative bridges between two sides. Here in migration, this middle narrative is non-attractive, not very well established, and not popular amongst people, which, as I will show later, creates much more polarized discourse divided into two clearly delineated camps. So this narrative, crisis and regulation, basically describes migration neutrally, just as a large important phenomenon, showing growing numbers and urging us to do something, but not taking any sides, whether we should accept more migrants or less migrants. No words such as solidarity or protection are used. And by the way, this narrative do not have a set of typical pictures. So we cannot write, for example, a computer algorithm finding this narrative just by identifying pictures. And now we move to the other side of the debate, 3 narratives that are built on a negative attitude towards migrants. The first one is a mirror narrative for tragedy. So this is a narrative saying the migrants are still out there, but they are coming rapidly and in large numbers, and they are dangerous. So what we need to do, says this narrative, we need to fortify, we need to build walls, we need to elect strong politicians who will be able to protect us. You probably all recognize this narrative because it is widely used by many political parties in many countries to build this feeling of urgency to protect our security, stability, or even sovereignty, because in many countries, these narratives also accuses European Union of interfering with local matters and forcing nation states to accept more migrants than they should. Images here are very clear and very suggestive. The first group is walls and gods and metaphors of shield and protection, showing that we need to protect our land. The second group of images are migrants. They are marching, usually directly towards camera. Very often, some elements of smoke, violence accompany them. They are like invading army. And when we combine these pictures together, what we get is migrants storming the border. So the central image for this under siege narrative, very clearly following the very old barbarians at the gate story. Second narrative from this negative group is the story that shows migrants as already being here in our country, in our local communities. But according to this narrative, the problem is that migrants do not integrate. They do not want to adopt our values. So they are presented now as an internal threat that threatens security, stability, and cultural coherence. This narrative critiques multiculturalism and this supposedly existing censorship that do not allow us to say clearly about how dangerous migrants could potentially be. This narrative very often focuses on criminal acts committed by migrants, especially highlighting the most violent one, like murders, rapes, or robberies. And again, a very disturbing set of images. We see images of riots, very often with fire and smoke. This was very prominent in the French corpus that we analyzed, riots in Paris. They very often feature triumphant gestures of migrants. They are showing fists or victory signs or some unpolite gestures, demonstrating that the situation is reversing. We are being replaced by migrants. We are the minority now, and they are behaving as they are the powerful majority, says this narrative. And very often regular photos of criminal activity, crime, people being accused with their faces covered. This creates a very strong association between migration and crime. And finally, the economical narrative that is skeptical towards migrants, contrary to economy-based narrative that is positive. This one is very popular. Even people who don't feel directly threatened by migrants as an invasive army or as potential perpetrators, very often feel insecure when the topic reaches economy and when we talk about social security, taxpayers' money, housing, or job market. In all these cases, it is very easy to lure people into this narrative that says, you have to wait a lot of time for healthcare. Look, now they are providing free and quick healthcare for migrants. You have to wait a lot of time to get a house. They get free housing. So this image of migrants taking an unfair share of taxpayers' money is very tempting. And again, we have two main typical sets of pictures here. One is relatively boring, a lot of texts and numbers and data. So all the images appealing to our reason, not to our heart. So just count it. It's not profitable for us to have these migrants. The second picture is more metaphorical. Very often these posts are accompanied just by pictures of migrants sitting and doing nothing. This is tricky because these may be pictures taken in refugee camps or people waiting on borders or even in home country. But just by picturing people sitting, we create this strong association that they are probably lazy and they are sitting there all day doing nothing and taking taxpayers' money. So let me now focus on some details from the case studies. We have, these are numbers for Ireland. As you can see, some of the narratives are more popular. For example, in Ireland, number 2. The solidarity narratives win with number 1, the tragedy narratives. Number 3, the good for economy, is not so popular. We can dive deeper into these numbers. But what is really fascinating is that when we use the algorithm to determine how the probability, the fact that a source uses one narrative influences the probability of using other, we can see that if the source used one of the anti-migrant narratives, it will almost certainly also use the others, but almost never use positive or neutral narratives. But if the source used one of the positive narratives, it will almost always use other positive narratives or the neutral narratives. This clearly shows us that we can see a very strong polarization here. There are no neutral sources. The neutral narrative is just one of the positive narratives from the point of view of debate analysis. And there are no sources that gives us different pictures. This is just a small statistical error. It almost never occurs that in one newspaper or from one politician, you can hear positive and negative statement. Even more interesting is the situation of different group of migrants. And here, let me use Poland as a very interesting case study. When we dive deeper into the numbers, we realize that different narratives are used towards different groups of migrants, and that Ukrainian migrants were almost always described in these positive narratives through the lens of tragedy and solidarity. And basically the society accepted that we need to help them, at least at the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion on Ukraine. But migrants from the Middle East and Africa, even this like Syrian refugees escaping directly from conflict, from war, were described in very different narratives as hostile forces invading us, not wanting to integrate, and stealing taxpayers' money. So when we take a look at how disinformation is working right now in Poland, we can see very clearly that they use this narrative leverage. They are not inventing new stories about Ukrainians, but they are just trying to take what people already have coded in their minds to talk about Middle East and African migrants and attach same set of narratives to Ukrainians. And let me show you an example here. 2 years before the invasion, a group of fake local portals were created on Instagram with just names of different cities like Kielce, Rzeszów, or Krakow, and online. And for the first 2 years, they were dormant. They were just reposting random, interesting or less interesting local stuff about missing dogs, open exhibitions, local politics, just copy-paste from other portals. But 2 days after the invasion, they started posting this kind of content, saying that look, another crime committed by a Ukrainian migrant, or a wave or an influx of Ukrainian migrants is heading towards our borders, or the shopkeepers need to close their shops or put special information because the shoplifting is skyrocketing after we accepted Ukrainian migrants. So we know for very clear reasons that these were established by Russian propaganda because one of the researchers in Poland used a very simple method. He clicked remind me password, and then you see the end of the email address for which the password will be sent, and they were all set up from Russian domains. So we know for 100% that this is disinformation and this is Russian disinformation, and we can see in lab conditions how cleverly it was created, not to invent new stories, but to use these old narratives that were already there, but just never attributed to Ukrainians. And unfortunately, I have to say, after 2 years, that they succeeded. Now, the border between these two groups is blending. So let me finish with some potential counter disinformation and depolarizing measures. We can use the same technique. We can see what are the potential narrative bridges to bridge the gap between these two narratives to depolarize the debate and facilitate discussion, but it won't be easy. As you can see, most of the narrative bridges, so the shared values between different narratives, are vertical here. So positive narrative usually share a lot of common value with other positive narratives and negative with negative narratives, with some interesting examples. For example, people who are in narrative number 7 saying migrants are stealing good hours usually value very high equality. So they may be tempted into considering the narrative number 2, solidarity, because it is built on very similar premises. Similarly, people who believe in narrative number 7 tend to claim that they are not pro-migrant or anti-migrant, they are just calculating reasonably. So reinforcing this narrative number 3, showing real numbers, how migrants can be beneficial for economy, and starting a real debate into how can we create a fair condition for different people to cooperate and work together on a common market. We can take people from narrative number 7 to narrative number 3. But with values, this is relatively difficult. So we looked even deeper to try to find some bridges connecting these two separate gaps. And for example, what is interesting is that contrary to what we've learned in climate and COVID, the pictures in different narratives may be very, very similar. Sometimes differences are super subtle. For example, this is a very popular picture used in many posts to illustrate tragedy. This is just a boat overcrowded with people. But let us take a closer look at the similar images used in the negative narratives. Here, we again can see overcrowded boats, but because they are swimming directly into camera, or this Normandy-like perspective of beach invasion is used, they look like invasive forces. So we need to be extremely careful about pictures and subtle details, because sometimes the matter of camera angle may switch people's perception from positive to negative narrative, and instead of solidarity, spread fear. When we compare narratives 1 and 5, they differ a lot, but they also share some common assumptions. So for example, both of this narrative very clearly highlight the sense of urgency and special circumstances. So the situation is dire. We cannot continue to living like we did. And the call for change is very strong. So very often people disagree because some of them are for status quo and some of them are for change. Here we have a good starting point. So people who believe in narrative number 1 and people who believe in narrative number 5 share at least one thing in common. They both believe that we need to change something, and we are in a special situation. So none of them want to continue the status quo. Similarly, people in 2 and 6, so people who believe in solidarity and people who believe that migrants do not integrate, they share this sense of local agency that we, the people, bottom up, can do something. We need to do something. We need to have this local perspective. This is not about Poland or EU. This is about Warsaw or Pruszków or whenever we live, about our local community. But at the same time, they tend to think long term. Maybe today the situation is good, but how it will look in a month, in a year, how it will look for my children or grandchildren. And this, again, creates a great platform for dialogue, because you don't share a lot in common, but you share one important thing. You are both interested in the situation you are creating for your children and grandchildren. And as I mentioned, number 3 and number 7 are very strongly linked by this feeling of rational calculation, that this is not about emotion. Let's sit down and count again. If it's beneficial, I can be persuaded to accept migrants. And these are the results of our preliminary research. We are now continuing to crunch some numbers on that to see which of these narratives are more interactive on Facebook, which are more popular, which are trending in different countries. And we will be very happy to share these results in a month or so. Thank you very much, and back to studio.
Thank you very much indeed, Marcin. For those who haven't seen Marcin in action before, he's an associate professor at the University of Warsaw, along with Andrzej, and he studies how culture shapes public perception of science, collective memory, and political trends. And I think you've seen that in action now. Fascinating what you've been able to show us, the Everest, in a sense, that is in front of us, and at the same time, I think you've played the role of a Sherpa there in starting to show some routes up that mountain that we could explore. That is, it is quite challenging, and we'll come back to that. I now want to come on to one of our partners in the Nodes project, CNRS from Paris, where I'm delighted that we have David Chavalarias with us once again. David is a professor at the CNRS. His work focuses on the analysis and modeling of social dynamics and social cognition, and that's particularly developed around the online opinion dynamics, manipulation, and the impact of ICT infrastructures on political debates. I remember seeing the images that he showed on climate back in October for the first time as being really quite marked in terms of how you saw the discussion online gravitating towards extremes in the last few years. The floor is yours, David.
So I will present the work that we did at CNRS with Sandra Architect and Yannic that attend also these meetings. And we'll talk about both migration and also the global circulation of the narratives. So we have developed at CNRS and also within the Node project some observatories of digital space. So first we went on Twitter and we were collecting messages on climate change, politics, pandemics, and most recently we switched to Mastodons because Twitter has closed all these access. And what I will show are based on all these databases. So first about migration, if we look about, for example, how we talk about great replacement theory in the French political Twitter sphere, we can see that this was what was the first French theory is not French anymore. This is here you have headlines from US media that is highlighted these facts, and on the bottom you see the evolutions of the number of messages that are talking about great replacements through times since 2016. So you have like 5 years of history here, and what you see is that while it was just posting regularly but at slow pace until 2021, abruptly these topics take over, and there has an abrupt increase here. This is a black curves here of these narratives in the French political sphere, and this is how you can follow the diffusion of this kind of narratives inside a national political sphere. But this gives you only quite the dynamics, but not really who is talking about that and how it is diffused in the digital landscape. So to go deeper into the analysis, I will show you how you can analyze the landscapes, like a geographical landscapes of these narratives. So very simply, we will use this principle that when you have an account that relay in several times another account without changing the message, for example, on Twitter, it is just a retweet, then this will be assimilated to an ideological alignment. So for example, if you have Greta Thunberg that tweets some things to somebody and that these people she's retweeting to share this content with a third account, then if this occurs a lot of times, then we can conclude that these second people here wants to amplify the voice of Greta Thunberg. So when you observe the digital space for sufficiently long times, what you see is that there are areas of accounts that exchange between them a lot of messages and more than with the outside of the rest of the networks, the outside networks. And if you apply to this generated graphs some algorithm from computer science and mathematics, you can automatically identify these communities, and then you can make a picture of the global landscapes where you make colors according to the global opinion. So, for example, if you apply this method to the French immigration debates, this is what you have. On this picture, every dot is a Twitter account, and the color are the communities that have been detected through the algorithms that I just described. So here what you see is that on the French immigration debates, you have several echo chambers or small communities. Actually, here you have about maybe 80,000 people. So you have communities that are talking in an homogeneous way, and between communities, you have different narratives. So here, what you see is a very fragmented digital space, but with a very dense and big cluster here at the bottom right, which is the far right that are spreading most of the narratives about immigration. So now if we want to go a little deeper into what is said, and for example, if we take, we identify the message that talk about great replacements or the notion also of remigration. So the narrative that is saying that we are invited by migrants and we should send them back to their country, then you can highlight only the accounts that are talking about that are here in green. And you see that this narrative is very concentrated. So the first lesson from that is that the different types of narratives about immigration or climates or COVID that we all have studied, generally, they are very concentrated in the communities that produce them. And one of the stakes of this community is to succeed into sending these narratives outside their own communities, which is actually quite difficult often. So now we can, here you have a landscape, and this is only focused on migration. Here's a link, I forgot to tell it, but the link that you see between two accounts are the link of sharing information. This is why you have a close, dense cluster where they share all the information. You don't see the link here because it's too dense, but here it's all sharing information about immigration. Now, if we zoom out and we look at the global landscapes about all the debates in France, and after I will switch to even global, more global landscapes. So if we look in all the debate in France, then we can identify the circulation of the overall narrative in this kind of space. So, for example, we can try to quantify the evolution of the informational space over several years. So if you do that, and if you're interested, you will find it also in this book. So if you do that for France, what you see is that in 2016 here, we have these landscapes, and in 2022, we have another completely different landscapes. So if I comment these landscapes, in 2016, you were going from the far left here to the far right here, going through the two moderate parties that were the Socialist Party here and the Right Party here. In 2022, there is a deep transformation of these landscapes. First, the two main parties, which were the Socialist and the Right, are very weakened. They are fragmented and smaller. There is this big party, which is the presidential parties of Emmanuel Macron that has emerged. But the most interesting change is that you have a very big cluster here of the far right, which is now split into different streams of far right. So you have Marine Le Pen here, but you have also Zemmour, and also here is like a conspiracy terrorist oriented far right communities. So this is a big block of far right. And here you have between the far left and far right, you have this committee here, which has emerged during the pandemics, which is led by Florent Philippot, which was number 2 of the Front National, Rassemblement National at some times, and which emerged during the pandemics. So now we'll go and zoom out again and see how this kind of big cluster of the far right, which is promoting most of the narratives about immigration, negative and divisive narratives about immigration, how it has been able to emerge. So let's come back to the pandemics. And here you have a landscapes of the exchange at the global level, worldwide level, about the vaccine. So again, every dot here the dots are very small because here you have about 200K accounts. So every dot is a Twitter account, and the link are the path of information sharing. So when you look at the global level, what you see is that you had 2 big blocks here. So this is international information about the COVID and the COVID scientists and the NGOs, etc., which are spreading reliable information about the vaccine and the COVID. And here in red, you have the US anti-vaxxer that were spreading a lot of disinformation. So at the worldwide level, these were the 2 main communities and like a bipolarized structure. But in addition to that, what you see is that you have many, many other communities. So for example, here in blue and purple, this is a French community, which are also divided into pro-vax and reliable information about COVID, and here the anti-vaxxer, French anti-vaxxer. And you have the same in Italy. Here is Italian anti-vaxxer, Brazilian anti-vaxxers, etc. What you see here is that this committee with the French anti-vaxxer, which was actually these committees that appear here in the French political landscapes. So this committee takes its information from the US anti-vaxxer. So the color of the link here is the color of the account that gets the information. So this means that you have account from the French anti-vaxxer that were relaying information from the US anti-vaxxer. And actually, there were influential accounts that were converting this information from the US to the French digital landscapes. And this helps during the pandemics to structure this very strong community here that appear here, that is make a bridge between far left and far right, and that is disseminating most of the disinformation about vaccine. But what is interesting is that it is not only disinformation about vaccine. Here you have a map of all the article of AFP, our partner, which is AFP Factual, which were fact-checking information online. And so they have produced, for example, for the English-speaking digital space, about more than 4,000 articles that were explaining why given information is false. So we have analyzed these 4,000 items with GAR Context, which is a text mining software that we are developing at CNRS and also with the help of nodes. And when you do that, you can identify the main keywords that are that compose this information and also how they relate with each other. So in this map here, now the dots here are no more people that are concepts. So for example, United States, immigration, vaccination, etc. And the link between these concepts show how they are associated in these disinformation networks. So at the global level, in the English-speaking world, what you see is that you have 3 main pools of disinformation. First, you have all this disinformation about vaccination that we just see as a associated community as a worldwide level and also in France. You have disinformation about climates here. And here you have domestic disinformation that splits into disinformation about migration, about the Russian war, about the protests in different countries, including India, etc., and France, etc., and disinformation about elections. So this is the global landscapes of disinformation from the fact-checking between 2020 and 2023. So it's 3 years of disinformation in English. If you do the same thing in French, then you have this kind of maps. And interestingly, what you see is that you find again the same cluster here about the taxing. So this means that this information, as we saw about the social connection, is transversal to the countries. You also have this information here about climate. And for the domestic disinformation, you have disinformation about Ukraine, disinformation about immigration, and here it's a more cluster, which is disinformation about different elections, but it is adapted to the French case. So what we had in Malia, etc., etc. So from these two maps, what you see is that you have a large topic about disinformation, that migration is one of them, but it's not the biggest of them, and that these topics are transnational. If we look at the evolution of this disinformation through time, so we can have this kind of visualization. So here, times flow from top to bottom. So here we are in 2021 until 2023. And this is every week. And every bubble here, which is zoomed here, is a topic that has been identified automatically from the this corpora of AFP fact-checking. So inside the bubble, you have a topic, and it is associated to some disinformation campaign. And when you have the bubble are linked vertically, it means that they belong to the same disinformation campaign. So when you look over the 3 years, what you see is that you have disinformation campaigns that were here all the time. For example, vaccination in red here is a disinformation campaign such that every week you have disinformation, and this never stops. Same for climate change, that started to become very strong in the mid-21 here, and after that never stopped. So these have became somehow some systemic disinformation campaigns. They are self-sustained. You have communities that are relaying everything all the time. And after, besides that, you have disinformation that are more focused and that are a campaign in short periods. For example, Ukraine war, at the start of the Ukraine war, you have a big campaign here. You have a campaign here with the Hawaii wildfire. And you have, every time you have an election, for example, Nigeria or the US midterms here, you have a small campaign. So from this analysis, what you see is that the disinformation campaigns that we saw that are transversal to countries like vaccination and climate change, actually, they are also systemic in time. So they are lasting in time. And besides this, you have more delimited in time disinformation campaigns, and some of them are about migration. For example, here this is the crisis about Mexico border, and there was a disinformation campaign. So now, if we look at the global circulation of this kind of narratives, so I will not go into the detail here, but I think it's important to mention this. How we compare climate, COVID, and politics. So, for example, this is again a social landscapes about the climate debates. So here again, every dot here a Twitter account, and when you map them, you see two big clusters. On the left, you have the pro-climate people, and on the right, you have the skeptics people. This is our observatory about climate. We have the same about COVID and the same about French politics. So we can look how the accounts are, which accounts are common between climate debates and, for example, vaccine debates, and does these accounts are aligned in the same ideas. So, for example, one of the disinformation campaigns in the climate that emerged around 2022 is that saying that now that COVID is over, climate will be the next big things to control the population. So this belongs to the narratives that was described by Andrzej and Marcin just before, of that oppose the elite and the people, and saying that the elites want to take advantage of the people, and either on the climate, either on the vaccines. And if you compare the digital space about climate here and COVID here, so these are two different and independent collections data sets. In every data set, we collect sometimes millions of messages per day, and we have two things that should be independent. On one side, you talk about climate, on the other side, you talk about COVID. But now, if you look at the accounts that are talking both about COVID and climate, and
David, sorry, just to butt in, we are a little bit up against the clock. We still have to hear from Guido, so as quick as you can.
I'm about to finish in 1 minute. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, David.
Yeah. Just 1 minute. So here, what you see is that the accounts that both are tweeting on COVID and climate, those who were climate skeptics here in pink were almost all of them anti-vax, and in all countries. And the same for the pro-climate, they were all of them pro-vax in all countries. So this means that you have a global alignment of anti-systems contestation, both in the climates and in the anti-vax. And this also is reported in at the national level. So if you do the same thing at the national level, you see that the French generalists are also the far-right people. So you have a global reorganization of the global information and narratives that align far-right people with anti-system contestation and false narratives about climate and also COVID. So now we also look at what we have on other social networks, because this was on Twitter. And if you look at other social networks, what you see is that the situation is completely different in social networks that are moderated differently. So for example, this is on Mastodon about the pro-climate. Here you have only one cluster. There is almost no skeptics on Mastodon. Also, there is here again hundreds of thousands of people. You don't find any skeptics on Mastodon. As for the topics, they are quite diverse, but more about reliable topics. The same about immigrations. You have more and more hostility on Mastodons. So just to conclude, we can say that the narrative circulation is global, with kind of meta-narratives like the opposition of elites as people that are transversal to topics. And the pandemics, as we saw, set the ground for the development of strong communities led by influencers that switch from one divisive polemics to the other. And also, they are the same that talk about immigration in a divisive way. And also to conclude, I think it's important to realize that the nature of the social networks and the moderations that are there and the algorithmic machineries largely impact the nature of the narratives that circulate within them. And when you have a network that is failing like Twitter, then you just can't expect to have more false information and divisibility. And this is a concern, I think, for the democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, David. We are now going to move on to another partner of this initiative, the Ca' Foscari University of Venice, in the form of Professor Guido Caldarelli, whose research focuses on the theory and application of statistical physics of complex networks based on social interactions. And he's been looking a lot at patterns in collective behavior. And I think he's going to give us an insight into the case of Italy, which isn't one of the countries that I had mentioned at the beginning, but it's going to be super interesting, I think, and it also relative to the role of disinformation, migration in Italy.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, especially to David, because I'm going to use some of the things he showed and to display what we did on analysis on research on migrants narratives here in Italy. So let's see if okay. So we start where we finished with the beautiful pictures by David. Just to show you, I mean, that's not all Europe is so rational, so clear. This is a wonderful picture we already saw. We are from the left side to the right side, the various political parties. This is the country of Descartes. In Italy, you know, we are the country of Renaissance, so you don't have to expect too much order in what we do. And this is the cloud of political parties, at least in a couple of elections ago. It's even more mixed now, but I mean, the various colors corresponds to the various parties. Here, for example, you have Silvio Berlusconi, that was Christian Democrats, let's say, as the European area. And on the similar side, we have the head at the time of the left-wing party, that was Partito Democratico, Matteo Renzi. Now he moved from the party in another party. So it's more, you know, I wouldn't say chaotic, but it's more, let's say, complex situation in Italy, as we expect. And the main message that is in this talk, that is also present in what David just showed, is that topology has a lot of information about the semantic, about what's going on in the debate. So if you're nearby somebody, you're probably sharing the same ideas. The second point, key message, home message from this talk, is that sometimes, very often, what you have around is a bot, it's not another person. So what we did, just a technical slide after that, we have verified users in Twitter. We're talking about Twitter, sorry about that. I mean, the pictures showed are the same by David. Verified users are those who claim their name, surname, and you have to send the documents to Twitter at the time. Now it's different, you have to pay, so probably you can cheat a little bit. But anyway, there are verified users and unverified users. And essentially by means of a statistical approach, so you take two different users, the green dots here, see what they are sharing as a contact on average. This is the verified, this is the unverified. At the end, if they share an amount of tweets, an amount of media or amount of information that is statistically significant with respect to null models, well, these two, you know, can be put together, and then they belong to the same cloud. So this guy, you don't know who he is. I mean, he's the black one with the question mark, can be connected probably very well with the verified one. So this is the idea. So let's go to the data. We collected some Twitter data relative to the debate that was for 1 month in the Italian Twitter sphere. So it's you know, it's a pilot within all the other activities shown so far. And these are the okay, sorry, I just put on the wrong side the people. So let's see if I can, okay, that's much better. This is the tweets collected, and there was some, you know, accident on the sea at the time, so there was a lot of debate, and then periodically we have, okay, this is the day frequency of tweets in Italy. And from this analysis, these are the raw data, we have been able to individuate two very distinct communities, in this case less chaos than before. So the red and the blue, that corresponds to the left and the right party respectively. At the time there was a central left government, so this purple part is the government accounts, more or less, and then you can, you know, individuate pretty clearly with networks, so who's who, what they're debating about. The keywords, sorry for the Italian, are migrants, essentially, immigrati e migranti, scafisti, people driving the boat, ONG, that's Sea-Watch, okay, these are the, this you can see, the Sea-Watch is the name of one of these ONG, and big boats, barconi, clandestini is, you know, immigrants again, not legal immigrants. Guardia Costiera Libica is, let's admit those people, okay. is the Libyan Coast Guard, shipwrecks, and sbarco. These are the keywords that we use to select amongst all the tweets. What is interesting of these is that when we look at the communities of this activity, I'll be very short, just a couple of slides, so we'll recover the time, don't worry. There is a big debate about more than 35% about this particular ONG, Sea-Watch Italy, that was, going around and save the people in the channel. And, some people are against saving lives. Some people are happy that they're doing this job. And again, the other communities, I don't know if you can see, but are also on this debate on the ONG. So this is what really polarizes the debate in Italy. Bots in the data, once you split all the Twitter sphere in the left government at the time party and the right-wing party, it's pretty clear that there is polarization, pretty clear there is little sharing of the same content, little sharing of the same ideas. What is interesting is that when you look for bots and people who are following and maybe retweeting bots in this Twitter sphere, they are for the vast majority in the right-wing party. So it's the blue side. And specifically, you can extract from these the people. This is in the activities, the sides of the vertices of the bubble. Real people verified who are following and retweeting all the bots that are the clouds around these very big vertices. So the preliminary results we obtained out of this data is that in this debate, in everything we are just discussing so far, there is a strong presence of bots, and for that particular debate, we have been able to attach the use of this bot, the retweet of contents made by this bot, essentially to one of the two parties. Okay, so I think I can stop here the slide. So.
Guido, thank you very much indeed. Great. Well, I think we have a very considerable amount of information. We have heard from Andre and Marcin, and I think it's very useful if we just have a quick refresher on those 7 narratives that had been identified on the left-hand side, the more positive ones, depending on your viewpoint, but so let's say our viewpoint. The tragedy, solidarity and empathy, the benefits that migrants provide to the economy, the more negative narratives on the right, under siege, so the migrants who don't integrate and who are perceived to be taking what is of the so-called indigenous populations, if that term really exists. And then down below, a rather concerning space, because I think that many of the people who will be on this call are very much involved in this world of regulation, and so that may be something that we need to dwell on a little bit, the degree to which that should be there if what we want to do is impinge positively. And Marcin, if you can flip through to the narrative bridges a moment in the visual, we can also remind ourselves of the connectors that they have been able to identify. Not easy, certainly when we compare it to climate, those who were party to the discussion in October, but we are seeing some elements there. I'm going to ask everyone to put their camera on now, and maybe we can take down the slide so that we can see all of the participants in the in our event. And I would like people to put their hands up who would like to comment, who would like to ask questions of our speakers, to take the floor now.